The rabbi would move into states of gamma. That would allow them to do things like levitation. That would allow them to be able to scan certain places and know where not to go during missions and operations.
Bashar talks about gamma, and gamma starts at about 40 hertz as the most synthesized and integrated our brain can express itself physically.
If we're accessing higher states of consciousness, the brain's slowing down its waveforms. The more it slows down, the more it opens itself to the universe and can access altered states.
If you zoom out and you observe gamma, you'll notice that gamma travels on a very slow wave. Most dense frequency also contains the highest.
And there's a video of him sitting in the fire. The guy's fine. All of these things are possible. And as you expand your awareness, as you reach higher levels of consciousness to a limitless state, when we reach that point, we pretty much do embody the fact that we are, we always were, and we always will be God. Welcome back to Hidden Revelations. I'm your host, Jason Shurka. Sitting by my side is Brandon Bozarth and Abke. And today we're going to be talking about the idea of God, the concept of God, and in many cases, the reality of God. Now, for a very long time now, partly due to the way modern day religion is organized, we've been taught that God is an external power. That's not a part of us, somebody that in some cases gifts us and blesses us, in other cases punishes us and just does not nice things when we do not nice things or wrong things. In this episode, we're going to reframe that idea. We're going to ask if that's true. Is God an external entity that punishes us when we do something wrong, when we sin? Or could God really be an awareness, a consciousness that's already part of each and every one of us, including animate and both inanimate objects and beings? Is it an awareness? Is it a consciousness? Is it a thing? Or is it all of the above? So why don't we start big picture before we start getting into the pyramid code, before we start getting into the Bashar Material and the law of one material? Let's talk about the idea of God big picture. What could this really mean? Generally speaking, when we go into the real spiritual nature of God, many modern day religions are like, no, don't do that. That's bad. That's turning God into something that he or she is not. Is it really a he or she? Is it an it? Is it an energy? What is this? So let's talk big picture first and foremost. God, what's your stance? What's your idea on the whole picture?
This is really great. So our relationship with God is a direct reflection of our relationship to all of life. That's my experience. Reason being is that our understanding of God answers the question, who am I? What am I? The answer to that question creates identity, our identity. That identity shapes our decisions. It shapes how we see the world, ultimately the depth and direction of our life. So that fundamental you could say concept or understanding or relationship towards and with God, in my opinion, is at the core of humanity's confusion. It's at the core of all of the suffering and the pain in the world is our relationship with God, or as Bashar would say, our relationship with all that is. Mm-hmm. And so not only do I think this is a important conversation, I think it's actually the source of all suffering on the planet. And it is one of the most, and because it's that, it's one of the most confusing areas of conversation on the planet right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been so distorted by religion, conceptualizing God to be a monarchical being, somewhere in the sky, far away, orchestrating the orbit of the planets and whatnot. So when realized beings like a Buddha, a Christ, a Krishna, especially in the case of Christ, declare their God consciousness, nobody listening has the understanding that they're not claiming to be the one orbiting the planets around the stars and whatnot. And that's because what we call God is really that sort of eternal conscious principle within everything, that I am knowledge. And it announces itself, or rather consciousness, that eternal conscious principle announces itself as the feeling of I, which you spoke a lot about in the last episode. And so I love the Law of One's explanation of God in that, calling it the one infinite creator. This is really where our science, I think, goes wrong, in that we will only understand the universe to the extent that we understand ourselves. And so we know that it's ridiculous to look at a painting and say that this painting exists, but there was no painter. Or this piece of art exists, but there was no artist. Music without a musician, right? It's totally insane, but we do that with the universe. We say there is creation, but no creator. So it's like, how do we ever expect to truly understand the nature of reality or creation when we divorce it from its creator? And we do that because religion has sort of bastardized the concept of God so much over the millennia and used it to justify torture and war and killing people and horrible things like this. And so we say, we don't like that shadow version of God. We're going to say that God doesn't exist. But it's like, we're all an atheist to some version of God, in that I don't believe in Zeus is the supreme creator. I don't believe in, you could name whatever religion you want, but none of us can deny that feeling of I am.
Right.
And it's that I am principle that is the one infinite creator, and that everything in the universe that has sentience or life or existence is knowing itself as that godly principle of I. And so that one infinite creator is experiencing itself in all the infinite varieties that we see in the universe forever and ever. And it always has been, and it always will be. And from my experience and understanding, that's what we call this thing described as God.
I think that's where terminology is a really important point too. Because even if we take like polytheistic religions and monotheistic religions, if you really, really break it down, to an extent, they're saying the same thing. For example,
right?
Monotheism will say there's one God, one source. That's it.
Yeah.
Polytheism will say, take Hinduism, for example, will say, I think they have 33 million gods or something like that. But there's one, to my understanding, that's Shiva, that everything sort of comes out of. And in that way, yeah, there are a bunch of different gods, which in my eyes really sort of represents different energies, different frequencies, different resonances that they can tune into. Archetypes, just like in Greek mythology, we see like Aphrodite and Zeus and all these different Greek gods. Aphrodite was the goddess of love. Maybe she represented 28 hertz or 532 hertz, something like that, you know? So I'm just kind of putting it out there to say, they're not necessarily saying that there isn't one source.
Right.
They're just breaking up one source practically to be able to sort of tap into that one source for specific purposes. And in that way, when we let go of the story, when we let go of the terminology, we're all saying the same thing, you know?
Right.
So this just leads to something I think is so common, the personification of God. I'd love to get your take on this, Aaron, but before I pass it to you, because I want to, people say a lot, if I'm not associated with a religion, I'm not going to have a personal relationship with God. Now, my experience growing up in a Catholic school until about 5th grade, and then not really having a relationship with God, and maybe in the last 5 years, having an extremely personal relationship with God, but not being associated with religion, my experience says otherwise. But I wanted to point something out because there's something you said. You said everything has that I am consciousness in it. And Bashar talks about this as well. It says everything is consciousness. We look for consciousness in things, and we're looking for how consciousness expresses itself in humans. So we never find it because we don't know what we're looking for.
Right.
So a rock, Bashar describes, is if I see a rock, the rock, because the mineral kingdom is in everything. There's minerals in our body. There's minerals in plants. Everything has minerals in it, and it's conductive. Electricity, there's currents that are so the mineral kingdom is like the foundation. It's the unifying expression of physical reality. So when I look at a rock and I go, oh, look at that rock, how the rock experiences self-awareness or consciousness is through our consciousness. Because since we can identify it as that rock and not that rock, we make a differentiation that's connected, that's known by the rock, because we are, what you witness, you affect. Our own physicists have shown this. And that information being sent from mineral to mineral on those lines of energy is saying, I'm identifying you as separate from that rock. So the rock through us knows itself as a rock because we're the ones interacting with it that way. So I want to make that clear, but I'd love to hear from you before we dive into some of the text here. Why do people create a God in the image of man or a person? And you growing up in church, what was it like for you going through that and coming to where you are now?